noted which city employees did not make the budget presentation on time. It's also duly noted which departments care about the budget and took time to show up to be here, so that will be noted as well. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Brian James. I'm the acting city manager. I'm typically the executive director over development, Dudley's counterpart as well. Also want to let you guys know on the front end that we are recording this and we're going to post it to the city's website. We did get some requests from folks to say, hey, if we can't make it out to one of the community meetings, still like to see it. So we tried to Facebook Live last night's community budget presentation, but in the hopes of getting a little bit better audio and video quality, we thought we'd record this one, post it as well. So just be aware you're being recorded, but certainly ask any questions that you might have. We'll have a chance for that going forward. And we did mention at the last two meetings that we were having these, and if somebody couldn't have made one of the ones for the public, they're welcome to show up and sit in with us as we go forward doing that. So while a lot of you may know each other, since the city has grown quite a bit and we have added some employees, everybody may not know everybody. So if we could start with everybody introducing themselves and what they do, starting with Gil. Y'all got to speak louder. So we can... That's what we're talking about. There may be somebody who doesn't know you, Sam. She stands up nervously. So we were just doing introductions. I was saying since we've grown quite a bit, and the city's gotten bigger and we have a number of satellite locations, everybody doesn't necessarily know everybody going forward. Again, if you came in late, we are going to record this, post it on the internet for folks in the community to see who haven't done it. So let me see real quick a show of hands. How many of y'all have been to one of these sessions in the past? Okay, most, but we've got a few folks who haven't. So if you have questions as we go ahead and ask. So if something doesn't make sense or we use an acronym that you don't understand or somehow I just start rambling and I lose you, make sure and raise your hand and pause and we'll kind of catch up. And then there's also James Walters who is here.
James Walters, Finance Department.
Yes. Most everybody knows James because they need money for stuff, and so they hear about James if they don't know him. All right, so we'll cover some of the basics first that you guys know. The city's budget runs October 1st through September 30th of every year. It doesn't follow the calendar. It's not a January through December. It's October 1st through September 30th. So this time of year, council has to approve the budget, hopefully, a bit in advance, 2, 3, 4 weeks maybe, prior to the start of the fiscal year, because if council can't agree on it, then we're sort of stuck in limbo. And I'm not sure we've ever had that happen, but it's problematic, obviously, if they don't approve a new budget as we roll into the new calendar year. So there's a bit of a scramble. But state law lays out a process to do that. And one of the key components of our budget is what we set our property tax rate at. So the level we set our property tax rate determines how much revenue we have coming in, and how much revenue we anticipate coming in means how much do we have to spend going forward. So the first step in the budget that happened a couple weeks ago is council sets the maximum possible tax rate that they could actually establish for the coming fiscal year. And so it doesn't mean they have to actually go with that. It just means they can't go over that. And I think the reason the legislature did that is they don't want council to kind of be like, oh, we're not going to raise taxes. We're not going to raise taxes. So everybody thinks, okay, no big deal. Don't show up. And then at the last minute, council jacks up taxes. And everybody goes, hey, didn't think you were going to do that. So they required them to kind of set what the maximum could be. So a couple of things with the tax rate, and this is obviously our property tax rate, not our sales tax rate, but our current rate is $49.10, so 49 cents per $100 of valuation. The state then also says, hey, look, in the interest of kind of making stuff clear to residents and property owners, we want you to calculate every year what's called the effective tax rate. And the way to think about that is, every year we have new development that comes in. Is that accurate, building inspectors? And permit tax, yeah. Other than right now, because if you're looking for an inspection for like your AC system or water heater, you're going to be waiting a while because they're all sitting here in the budget meeting and nobody's showing up at your house. But they will after this. But, you know, we have new development that comes in, new construction, new buildings, things like that, and that adds to our tax base. But what the state basically says is, look, if you assume that you didn't have any new development and you were just collecting property taxes from those same properties and buildings that you did last year, based on how much valuations go up from the appraisal district, right? So every year, those who own a home, you get a thing from the appraisal district saying, hey, the value of your home may be the same, but typically it's gone up or it's gone down, and that affects how much you pay. And so basically they say, assuming that you didn't have any new development, based on the valuation change, what would the tax rate be to bring in the exact same amount of property taxes? And so that's called the effective tax rate. Makes sense? So the gist of it is if overall property values go up, then your effective tax rate would be lower than your current tax rate. And that's what we've had happen this year. We've also had the reverse occur where the effective rate is higher because valuations have come down, and so you'd actually need to raise the tax rate to bring in the same amount of revenue. And so it's a theoretical because it misses out on some things that come into play with it. But again, I think it was the state saying, hey, let's make sure we're clear with folks what's happening with city revenues and budgets and things like that. Okay? And then the other thing they've done is they've created what is the rollback rate. You can see that's 5146. The rollback rate is the highest valuation or the highest tax rate that council could impose without the voters having the ability to get together a petition. And if they got that petition with enough signatures, it puts this issue on the election. And if the voters aren't happy with that, they can bring the tax rate down from where it was established to the rollback rate. They can't bring it down to the current, or they can't bring it down to the effective, but they can essentially cap us at the rollback rate. Okay, and so it's again a way the legislature put in place to say, hey, citizens ought to have some recourse other than voting council out of office, something they could do more quickly to kind of restrain their local government if they think they're going up too much on taxes. Okay, so that's what you got. So keep in mind in terms of the impact the tax rate has on our budget, every 1 cent is equal to about $354,000 of additional revenue. Okay? So it's a little bit going up on the tax rate, but that's a sizable chunk of money coming in, right? You guys can think, hey, if we had an extra $354,000, what are all the things we could do with it? And that equates to about $22.17 for the average homeowner, okay? And the average home in Schertz is this year going to be $221,000, which is pretty substantial. And for a lot of people, it's like, wow, that's hard to believe that the average home value in Schertz is now $221,000. And that's up, obviously, about $10,000 from 211. So remember we talked about the current and the effective change? Well, that's illustrated there by the average value going up a little bit. And it's slightly different because that includes new development that comes in. So as we're building new houses, and those new houses are more and more expensive, it pulls that average up with it. And so a couple things to keep in mind when we talk about the impact of a tax increase on residents is, one thing that hits them is when the appraisal district increases the value of their home, they're going to pay more in taxes even if you keep the same rate, right? Because they're paying more. But when we then go up on the tax rate as well, they're going to pay more on top of that. So for us to go up to the rollback rate from $49.10 to $51.46, your average resident is going to pay $100 more a year. All right, makes sense? And if your house is worth more than that, you're going to pay more than that. If your house is worth less, you're going to pay less than that. Okay? And so does that kind of make sense? Everybody? All right, nods. All right, well, let's talk about where the city gets money from, the different sources of revenue that kind of come in. And so one thing to kind of keep in mind, we'll probably jump back and forth, but we'll generally talk about the city's general fund. And so while we think about the city's budget as one big pot of money, it's really not. What you've got is a pot of money that's the general fund, but then you've got some other separate pots as well. And those are sort of our enterprise funds or our designated funds. So EMS, for example, y'all are not part of the general fund. There's a separate EMS fund that pays for EMS stuff. The water department, the sewer department, those have separate funds as well. EDC has their own kind of line item in revenue. But most everybody here, your department's operations are funded by the general fund. So fire, purchasing, Civic Center primarily is general fund, GIS, inspections, general services, public affairs. That's primarily done through the general fund. Now, some people tap other sources a little bit. So for some of the stuff at the Civic Center, we may use some HOT funds, hotel occupancy tax funds, but a small amount for that. Parks has some designated funds. So there's a Parkland dedication fund. So when we get new residential development that comes in, those developers have to either pay us a fee or dedicate some land and make improvements to park as a way of trying to keep up. And so Parks has a couple of funds, the Tree Mitigation Fund, the Parkland Dedication Fund, but they can only use those on limited things. So they don't pay any of staff salaries with those, but the Tree Mitigation Fund is used when we trim up trees around the city. It's used for that, or if we need to put new improvements to park, like at Mary Whitfield Burke Park, we can use the Parkland Dedication account for that. But most of us are done through the general fund, so we'll kind of talk about the general fund. But if you see what our anticipated revenues are, it's almost $32 million. The bulk of it, 42%, comes from property tax. So the big chunk of our revenue is property tax, which is why that has such an impact on what we can do when we change the rate. We also have sales tax. Now, people tend to think of sales tax as you go to the store and you buy something, right? You go to Walmart, you're going to buy something, you pay that additional sales tax on top. But that actually includes some other things that we get. James, you want to talk us through what else, other than that, what typically people think of as sales tax that factors into that?
So companies also pay sales taxes. We have some manufacturing and wholesale companies that stores or restaurants like buy stuff from Cisco Foods. We have a big Cisco complex out on Schwab and David Lax Boulevard. And so they're not necessarily citizens going to that store and buying stuff, but restaurants are. And so that sales tax also comes to the city of Schertz.
And then for construction projects?
And construction projects, so construction works a little bit different. Normally it's wherever you go to buy something, that's the entity that gets the sales tax. So if you go to Cibolo, even though you're a Schertz resident, Cibolo is going to get your sales taxes when you go to their Walmart. But construction's different. So if we have a big construction project in the city of Schertz, it doesn't matter where they're buying the materials or getting the service or renting the equipment, wherever the location is where the construction is taking place, that's the entity that gets all that sales tax.
Okay. So while it seems high, 26%, and that's a good amount, keep in mind that the amount we actually derive from residents or citizens going and buying things and paying is significantly less than that. We don't have as many kind of retail stores as you see in Live Oak or San Antonio or Selma or things like that.
Our retail only makes up about 30% of our sales taxes.
Yeah. So only a third of that 26% is actually that sort of stuff. So that's an area we're light in because we're sort of stuck right next to the Forum that has all of that, and then you've got New Braunfels just up the way, and so it's still pretty easy for folks to drive up and down. So our sales tax from kind of residents buying stuff or people is lower than it would typically be, okay? And those communities, Selma and Live Oak, they benefit from that. It's our residents going down there to the Forum and spending, and they derive sales tax off that. But that's sort of where the money comes from. Now, we also have franchise fees, so the utility companies that aren't us, GVC, CPS, when they want to locate their utilities in our right-of-way, they have to pay us a charge for doing that, and that's something they pass on to their customers. Fees, about 6%. So again, building inspections, what they bring in, the things we charge for people to rent pavilions and whatnot, that goes in there as well. And so that's kind of where the money for the general fund comes from. Okay? So the other part to keep in mind with the breakdown of our property tax rate between INS, interest and sinking, and maintenance and operations, is while we think about it as we have one tax rate, and again, it all kind of is lumped together, we actually divide it up in terms of how we characterize it or how we use it. So we have interest and sinking, INS, and M&O, which is maintenance and operation. So it's a little bit intuitive, but interest and sinking, as interest would imply, that's the money that we have to pay down our debt. So whenever we issue bonds, like to build a new fire station or buy a fire engine truck thing, big expensive stuff, ambulances, we'll issue debt for that often. And much like when we take out debt as a citizen, either a credit card or a home loan, then we pay interest on that. And that's the same thing that we do. So part of our taxes go to pay that interest and sinking portion of it. The other part is maintenance and operation. And that's the part that when we talk about every year with the budget, hey, what stuff can we buy? Can we get a new software program? Can we add an additional staff person? Can we get a laminator bill for GIS? That comes out of our maintenance and operation stuff. Most of what we want to try to fix on a regular basis, the stuff that kind of breaks out at parks, swings and water fountains and whatnot, that should be coming out of maintenance and operation. So while issuing debt brings in more money really quickly to do things with, we pay more for it over the long haul. And so typically you really want to only issue debt for something that's got a long lifespan, not kind of daily operations. So again, those of you who do the Dave Ramsey thing that the city offers, and if you're not aware of that, talk to Jackie afterwards. But one of the things he talks about is don't be issuing debt for stuff. Save up and go buy a used car if you need to. Don't be putting things on a credit card because you're going to pay more later for that. And frankly, if you're having to put kind of lunch and dinner and stuff on a credit card, you really need to reevaluate kind of your budget for your house and see if you can make some adjustments so that you're not having to do that. And so same thing with the city. And you can see that that's kind of gone up and down over time. So in 2006, you can see where sort of the breakdown is between our maintenance and operation and our interest and sinking. And so M&O was the largest portion of that. But then when we started to have some things happen and do some different things, issuing debt, whatnot, lowering the tax rate, we saw our M&O, which is the money we have for regular stuff, start to shrink as a portion of that, okay? And so when it feels like, hey, we're tight, well, part of it is we're spending more of our money on that debt than we are. And so with the proposed budget this year, this is the first year we're actually going to get back up to that same percentage of our tax rate that'll actually go to fund operations. And that's by design. That's trying to get away from issuing debt, starting to fund things regularly and kind of keep doing it that way. And so to go back a bit to the tax rate breakdown, sorry, James, you're mocking me now, with regard to the actual one here. So what staff is recommending, what staff has recommended to City Council is that they raise taxes on the property owners and Schertz, our residents and businesses, to go up from the current to the rollback rate. So it's a big jump. And again, if you think about that average home, it's $100 a year. Now, some people may sit there and go, well, you know, I spend however much getting my Diet Coke every day, which is like 86 cents. Or, you know, stopping at Starbucks, you're paying $5 for a cup of coffee. And so, you know, yeah, it's, you know, I can cut back once a week on Starbucks or even not bother to do that. But frankly, we've got different people in different situations in our community. And for a lot of folks, thank you for raising up the Starbucks cup as an example. I appreciate it. But, you know, we've got other people that, you know, aren't as fortunate, don't have as much fixed income, limited basis. And that's a tough thing to take in. You know, that affects them. So, you know, need to be cognizant of that. But the reason we're recommending that we do that is that we don't feel like the way we've been operating is sustainable going forward. And it's in a couple of areas, frankly. One is we have been so focused on keeping up with new growth and new development that we haven't been having the funds to go into keeping up with the stuff that we've already got. So if you look at our streets and you talk to residents, they're starting to wear in spots. If you look at our sidewalks that are starting to buckle or we've got gaps in sidewalks, we're not going out and filling in those gaps or repairing those sidewalks at the rate we need to. Parks Department is out of money now in their maintenance budget. So any of you who are thinking, hey, the weekend's coming up, I'm going to head down to Pickerel Park and I'm going to play basketball, are they going to be able to do that, Jared? No. Jared's breaking your heart. Why is that? Show the picture of that, James. Because it's an old facility. We kind of tacked up some hoops to it. Maybe the building wasn't quite designed for it. But when some kids were playing, fortunately on another backboard, that one fell. And as I understand it, it's fairly heavy, correct? Took two folks to get it into the back of a truck. So that's indicative of the problem we're having. And you know, Parks had just been dealing with the state of that pavilion and some of the structural issues, so it's not as though they weren't aware, hey, we've got some things going on there. We've just got some old things. So now the backboards come down. But if I were to call Jared and go, hey, man, when are we getting backboards up or new solution, new installed, his answer to me is, when are you going to give me the money? Because they don't have any more money to do it. And so part of that is I think we've gotten better at focusing on the existing stuff. We've been pushing harder for it. We've made some changes. We contract out, for example, with Parks, we've contracted out with our mowing. Now, it takes time to manage that contract because if the contractor's not shown up, Jared's got to deal with it and Sandy's got to put in a call. If they miss an area, don't do a good job, we got to get on them and get it going. But now our Parks folks are able to fix things and not just mow, but they've got to have the money to do that. And so there are a couple of reasons, despite all the growth we've had, and let me be real clear. With regard to our budget, our revenue every year for the last 20 years has gone up every year. We've not ever faced that we have less money one year than we did the prior year. It's always gone up. But every year we have had growth, right? And so we have greater expenses because we get more calls for fire, right? Because we've got greater population. We're having to drive further distance for those EMS and fire calls because we've got people way down in southern Schertz now. And so our cost of providing the same level of service goes up every year because we have a growing population, so we get more calls and more things like that. And so the question is, while our revenue may have gone up, is it going up to keep up with that? Coupled with the fact that, you know, while we talk about, well, you know, but home values are going up, so you've got more revenue coming in there. Sure, we do, but our costs go up as well. So, for instance, it used to cost us, how much, James? $57,000 for a police car. The old Crown Vic, right? All the equipment, all the stuff that goes into, not inexpensive. Now it costs
$66,000?
$66,000. And that was just about 5 years ago. So we've got the Tahoes, because we're not doing the Crown Vics. Still got to outfit them, still got to equip them, still got to do all that stuff. But our cost for that same thing, replacing a police car, is more expensive now than it used to be, right? Our cost for staffing is more expensive now than it used to be. Because those of you who've been here a couple years, you hopefully probably are making more this year than you were last year. And hopefully you're thinking, I hope I'm going to make more next year than I am this year. So because we give raises through merit, and we've been doing it through the class and comp, our cost for personnel goes up as well. So same number of people, we've got increased costs. So we can't just, even though we've gone up, we have not gone up at the same amount. And so every year it feels really tough. We think, why do we not have more money this year, given how busy we've been in terms of inspections, in terms of trying to build new parks to serve our increased citizens, keeping up with the existing facilities we've got, keeping up with all the different areas we're required to serve. Why do we feel so tight? Well, we've had some things that have kind of depressed our revenue coming in. So a few of those are, we've had a significant increase in the disabled veteran homestead exemption. So the state gives, and the city's approved in some cases, exemptions or limitations.
Just the state.
Just the state. State approved those. We can approve the over 65 freeze. But the state approved exemptions, and one exemption they approved a number of years ago is for disabled veterans. And the disabled veteran homestead exemption is a full exemption from property taxes. That's probably a good program. You've got somebody who served in the military, is injured, has a significant disability. It's going to limit their ability to work and earn money. And so, all right, makes sense. That would happen. And then also there are exemptions at a lower percentage for kind of lesser injuries. The surviving spouses of first responders, injured on duty or killed on duty, there's an exemption for them as well. So a good program, but that significantly impacted us. So let's talk about the degree to which it has. So across the top, you can see the value of property that had that full exemption on it. So back in 2014, it was $88 million that had this exemption. That didn't pay property taxes. And so that reduced the revenue we have coming in. It went up a little bit in 2015 to 128, 162 in 2016, but then went up to 229, and this year up to $272 million for that homestead exemption. And that equates to, in 2018, that $272 million, $1.4 million less in revenue for the city because of that. Okay? Again, broken down, $950,000 for the general fund, the other part for interest and sinking. And you can see from the bottom, the growth in properties that have that disabled veteran homestead exemption went up 18.6% versus the total exemption growth or the single-family market value growth. So those exemptions are growing at a much, much faster rate. And I'm not sure why. I'm not sure if it's because greater awareness of the program, change in standard to meet that category, but it's something we don't have control over. And our deal, our stance has been, we're not criticizing the program of giving that exemption. What we have a problem with is is that burden for providing that exemption does not fall equally on every resident of the state of Texas and doesn't fall equally on every city across the state of Texas. So last year we were struck by the fact when we were looking at budget projections and saying how much more do we have come in, and most of our growth down in southern Schertz is in Bexar County and it's residential growth. And what we saw when the numbers came in is like, it appears there's been no additional taxable valuation. And that was because the value added by new construction was offset by the increase in the veterans exemption nearly entirely. And that equated to about how much in value?
Like $35 million. We added about $35 million in new homes, and then we added about the same amount in new exemptions. So it was if every home that was built in Bexar County that year was exempt. Didn't pay anything.
And so, you know, what we did is we worked with GIS, Tony and Bill, and they kind of mapped out, and we said, well, let's look at a typical community like us. So we looked at City of Colleyville, which is up in the Dallas area. It's about the same population, about the same kind of demographic. And we kind of mapped out, color plotted it, what our community looks like and what their community looks like with color. And it's radically different. I mean, you're clearly struck by the fact that we have a far, far higher level of those. Thus, it's not borne by everybody equally. So we're going to be pushing council to make a stance this legislative session to push the state legislature to say, hey, let's spread this across every community. Not sure it's going to happen. Now, the state does have a program to help offset this, but you've got to reach a certain value. We think, in fact, we've lost so much that this year is the first year we'll be eligible. But they don't tell you can recoup everything you've lost. It basically starts with, well, you can start with half of it, and then if we've got enough money, we'll see how much you get. And so you can imagine, even with what people are eligible for, state didn't fund fully. So we're not expecting to get near that $1.4 million back. Okay? Now, as bad as that may seem, the example I've given is be thankful you don't work for the city of Killeen. Because the city of Killeen loses about how much?
So while we lose about $950,000 in our general fund, Killeen's closer to $2.5 million.
Theirs.
We have a tax rate of
75 cents. You know, so we're at 49.52. They're going up slightly. So a much higher tax rate, losing a lot more money. And so they've had significant issues the last couple of years, if you kind of read about them, if you search with what they're doing. So it could always be worse. But again, so why do we not feel like we have as much money? That's one reason. Now, the other thing is we've had a decline in court revenues. And again, there are a number of reasons for it, but you can see where we used to be. Back in 2003, brought in about $451,000. Went up in 2012, so 10 years, to $1.4 million. So Schertz probably deservedly had a reputation as a bit of a speed trap along with Selma. You did not speed going up and down 35, right? So we'd pick up. But it's come down since then now to less than $400,000 that we don't have coming in that we had previous years that we were relying on to pay for all the stuff we needed. So if you talk to PD, you know, it's a number of reasons that are part of it. Part of it is they're focusing on how do we make the community safer, and does issuing tickets to folks speeding on 35 really make us safer? Or is what we found when we talked to our residents, their answer is no, we want you out in our neighborhoods. Get out in the neighborhood in the morning. Kids are walking to school and keep speeds down. And often there, people aren't driving so fast that it warrants a ticket. Just need to kind of depress it a little bit. You know, and there clearly have been communities across the country that you can see the problems and the issues that are created with cities really using this as a revenue source and the conflict it creates with the community. And again, if we're trying to do a bit more with community policing, if our residents' interaction with PD is getting tickets, doesn't necessarily set it up for success as opposed to what can we do for you, what can we help make you safer. So not necessarily a bad thing, but it has an impact to our budget. And so now with the $1 million there and the 1.4 on the other, we're up to 2.4 million less than we would have if things had stayed the same. And then frankly, we weren't necessarily being as tight within the lines with how we spent hotel occupancy tax funds and Economic Development Corporation funds as we would have liked to have been, and it really wasn't sustainable. If people say, why are you spending this money on this? I don't see the linkage. You know, what we hear is the story of Economic Development Corporation was buying toilet paper for the fire department. So how do you really kind of justify that? Well, fire provides service to the businesses and the business generate. I mean, you can kind of get there, but then you kind of go, yeah, okay, that's a little bit thin and a little bit tenuous. Let's use EDC money what it's for, but that's cost us about $250,000 a year. So now we're up to over 2.5 million less in revenue than we would have had before. And then, as I said, some of our costs have gone up. So our costs have gone up for, you know, like for like new police cars. But then also we have to add facilities to serve our residents. So when we add a third fire station, right? You know, it's $8 million for the building that we're going to build for the permanent 3. We've got the equipment, the trucks that are $650,000, $750,000. But those are kind of one-time expenses. The trucks have to be replaced, and the buildings have to be maintained, and we have to have power for them. But the real cost are for the folks that have to staff the fire station. That's another $1.2 million every single year. So it's a big cost to us. So our costs go up. Our revenue's been compressed a bit, even though it's going up. And thus, we have done everything we can do to keep up with new growth. and we have not focused on maintenance. In addition, frankly, we've not staffed adequately and we've not paid adequately for the folks that we've got here. So we ask a lot of the folks that we've got. We don't pay enough, so we wonder why we have turnover. We wonder why we have trouble hiring people on occasion. So the issue is we're in this sort of vicious cycle of we're issuing debt for stuff that we should pay from the general fund, and now I'm paying interest on it. We're so short of money that all we can do is put out fires. So for instance, no pun intended, figuratively put out fires. They do other stuff other than put out fires. But so for instance, we hear the AC going in here. We have not been going around Well, it's not. Okay, there it is. All right. The batteries are probably going because we don't have enough money for that stuff. But so we don't, because we're so short on money, we don't have the money to have, an AC contractor come out a couple times a year and just sort of service it, check it like we'd want. Like at your house probably, you may have a contract with a company and they come out before the winter, before you put the heater on, and kind of in the spring and check it, make sure everything's working. And you pay for that, but the idea is you save money in the long run, just like your car. In theory, most of us hopefully have our oil changed on our car regularly, right? And those who have kids that we are paying for cars for, we tell them, hey, did you get the oil changed? Did you get the oil changed? Hope that they've done it. But we do that, we spend that money so that the life of the car is longer. Because if you don't ever change the oil, the car is going to break down sooner. Well, that's effectively what we were doing with our AC. We weren't servicing it, we weren't cleaning it, so they would break. We don't have the skill set on staff to really know, so we have to call somebody in, and often. And all right, we'll try one more time, and then we'll switch to that. And so then we're paying for a whole new AC. So again, we're putting out fires as opposed to doing the maintenance. We can't break that cycle. It's the same thing with leaky buildings. So when y'all leave here, if you go look behind the community center, Brian's had enough. He's done. Direction while he's doing that. If you go around the community center, you'll notice we've got a constant stream of water coming off the top of that building through the pipe, and it drops down. Well, it drops down and it catches the window ledge. Now, that's probably not a good thing, right? And there is literally a pool of water in the base. I don't know if there are fish in there. There could be, at this point, fish living in that pool of water. We know that's happening, but there's not money to correct it. So, for instance, the folks over in Building 1, where Will offices his hallway, when it rains, they got water in. We knew it. We've known it for years, Debbie, right? We just haven't had the money to fix it. Same thing at Fire Station 2, right? Fire Station 2 leaked. We've known it leaked. We've known it leaked. So we spent, James can tell you how much we spent on Fire Station 2.
So Fire Station 2, the walls, we had to replace all the outside walls. That came in around $400,000 and $450,000. But then, water's been leaking through it for years. So when we went inside and saw the drywall damage and some other potential mold issues in the floor, so we replaced the cabinets, drywall, some flooring, for another $50,000 on top of that.
Yeah. So again, we're in this vicious cycle where you're going, just fix the leak when you notice it, and then we save a bunch of money. But you got to have the money to do that. That's indicative of the problem. That's why we've had the problem, some of the reasons going forward. The other thing is we have continued to try to increase salaries of our folks. So we've done the merit increases, and we did the class and comp study. So 4 years ago, council went out and said, let's look at what we pay our folks relative to everybody else. And what they found out that I think was a bit of surprise was we pay in the low 40% on average relative to other folks. So if you remember back in high school when you took standardized tests, the lower percentile is bad, the higher percentile is good. So we were in the bottom half in pay. So no wonder we were having police officers leave to go to other communities. No wonder we couldn't hire folks. So we had greater turnover, which costs us more. And also we asked a bunch of our people. And so council said, wow, that's shocking. What can we do to go forward? And so they said, let's come up with this plan for 4 years. So in the budget is raises for that last group of folks for class and comp that goes into effect kind of first paycheck in October, gets us sort of through the plan. But even with those increases, and this year we're paying how much more for staff, same number of people, just due to class and comp, not merit.
So in October 1, this coming October, when the last year hits, we will have given $1.6 million in pay increases over that 4-year period. So we'll be paying $1.6 million more for those same people than we were 4 years ago.
And that's just for the class and comp increase.
Just class and comp and just
not
general.
the merit, and that's just general fund. So that's a big chunk of money. That's a lot, right? I think so. But we're still in the bottom half. Even per the study, we weren't crossing that threshold of 50%. And I think that's indicative for a lot of folks. If we're saying, hey, we want the best, we want to ask a lot of our people, we care about our people, paying the bottom half. It's contradictory. And so the reality is, some of the things that we do with the budget, and I'm going to jump around, is we do a 5-year budget model because cost of things grow. So for instance, you hire somebody now, you've got to assume they're going to get an increase in salary next year, so costs are going to go up, and not just for salary, but for benefits and things like that. As we add people, we need more space, so our costs go up. So we do a 5-year budget model. If you want to show what that looks like, to sort of make sure that we understand the implications of decisions we make today on the future, okay? So that we don't find ourselves going, hey, 2 years ago, we opened a natatorium, and now it's costing us $350,000, $400,000 a year to operate it. We didn't realize it and didn't realize we couldn't afford it. It's things like that we want to avoid. So you can see we map that out. And that's the simplified version of it. But one thing we do as well that we have to maintain, so this is a bit like your savings account. So again, Dave Ramsey going back, you got to have that $1,000 you start with and then try to build up to 3 months, is we have a reserve fund. And y'all may remember, those who've been here a while, that a few years ago, because we had spent that down, because we had spent down our savings account, we had basically 2 weeks of operating costs in reserve. Meaning if something really bad happened, we could fund stuff for 2 weeks, and that's it. There's no money for paychecks, no money for anything. So again, imagine, you think, well, how likely is that really to happen, Brian, right? So what were we doing about a year ago? Just about, maybe a year and a month or 11 months ago. What were we dealing with? Anybody remember? Hurricane, right? So again, we think this stuff can never happen. Did anybody go down to help out down on the coast? Anybody in fire? So yeah, did it look like it used to look like? No. There was a bunch of stuff destroyed, right? So now imagine what happened. So again, what do you think those numbers looked like for, say, Rockport with regard to that? So that's why you have a reserve fund. So despite all the aid you get and things like that, what we forget about the explosion up in West that wiped all out of the community, when that stuff happens, your values drop. People aren't spending money on sales tax. They're having to get out and can't get back. You've got less money to keep going with your operations, let alone rebuild, which is why you have that. But we had gotten down to 2 weeks because we had overspent. And so we worked really hard the last few years to build that up, and we built it up fairly high. And so last year, one of the things we talked to council about is, hey, we've done really well, we've worked really hard, we've built this up, but when is enough enough? What are we trying to get to? And so last year what we did is we set the policy to say we're going to set our reserve fund at 26%. And so 25%, the bulk of it, is for an emergency. And we talked a lot with folks about what's an emergency. It's a natural disaster kind of deal. It's an explosion or a man-made one. It is not the economy turning. Now, what we did is we kept 1 more percent, 25 to 26, so that when the economy turns, because we all know it will, we work in these cycles, so it goes up and down, and it's going to go down, we have the ability to respond to that a little more quickly. But I want to be clear, because this was a significant part of that policy discussion. That means if we've got something in progress, we can finish it out. But to be clear, this city has taken a lot of pride that we never laid anybody off in the downturn. which is great. But keep in mind, even in the downturn, our revenue never dropped. It kept going up. We just kept spending like it was growing faster. But what we essentially said is, the trade-off for that is, if we take a hit in the economy and there's a downturn and it looks like it's going to be substantial and we can't fund it, we are going to have to cut costs, and that may include cutting staff. That's just part of what goes with that. So again, part of why we look forward, part of why we're real conservative with this stuff is to avoid that sort of thing, but it was a change in policy. And so what we were going to do is we're going to spin that fund balance down. So you can see we're at 39.4. We're going to tap into that sum, get down to 32.9, 29.6, 26.3, and then lock in at 26%. So we have money to put in for things that were drawn down, but we have to be careful how we use that, because that, once we hit to 2023, I'm tapped on that, right? It's like I win the lottery of a little bit, or $5,000 and I can tap, but I'm not going to have it after that. And so we have to be cautious on how we spend it. And even though we're tapping into the reserve, again, our cost of things has gone up, like cars, vehicles, and things like that. Yes, James?
Sorry, I just
No, go ahead, jump in.
Yeah, thank you. When you hire a new person, you may think, oh, that's a $60,000 expense. We have to pay him the salary and stuff. If you look over a 5-year window, all of a sudden that's $300,000 that the city has put in for that one individual that could go to street maintenance or something else that we could have fixed up. So that's what we were looking at the 5-year model, because we make some of those decisions, like a person, oh, that's $60,000, we got that capacity. But what does that look like over a 5-year term, and how best should we spend that money to be most effective?
And so that's kind of why we feel that way. So the way the mechanics of developing the budget work, and some of y'all who are department heads may be more involved in this, like Jason or folks, others may less so, is we kind of talk about two aspects of the budget. We talk about a base budget and then expanded programs. And when we talk about base budget, it's basically how much money do we need to have to maintain the same level of service that we had the previous year, all right? And so what that means is personnel costs are generally going to go up because we're paying people more, so base budget is going to go up for personnel for that. Travel training. So, for example, we send the planning and zoning commissioners to a conference every year, a state conference. And so if last year the conference was in Dallas, we've got to drive them up there, and they're going to drive up, some poor staff person has to drive up these commissioners. They're going to get a hotel, or multiple hotel rooms, each get their own hotel room. That we could consider making them room up to save a few bucks, but they get hotel room. And so there's a cost for that. Well, this year, if the conference is in San Antonio, they can leave from here, go back and forth. There's no need for a hotel. So the base budget, that travel training line item would decrease, or the base budget. And then next year, if it's in Houston, it'll go back up to what it costs. Make sense? And that way we keep there from being creep in the budget. You've also got to defend why things need to go up at the same level of service. So like some cities, we don't allow a 1.5% increase across line items without being able to defend it. Other places do. But what you get over time is these things sort of balloon up, and you've got waste. We were helped, frankly, by the fact that we had a shortfall about 6 years ago. Some of you may remember mid-year. And mid-year, in the spring, we went around and said, we got to cut about $600,000 out of our budget. Now, we'd spent half already, so it wasn't as though we had a full year to cut from. We had to take that out of half the year. And so that helped us to kind of really get rid of some of the areas where we probably had some waste. But frankly, we cut into some maintenance stuff as well, and we kick the can down the road, okay? And then we talk about expanded programs. And expanded programs are those things that we weren't doing last year, we sort of cobbled together last year but hadn't really funded, and we wanted to do going forward. And so some of you have participated in this, and this I think everyone really enjoys. Jason, is that accurate? No, it's okay. Huh. Well, we can talk after then if you don't enjoy that process. But your department head, some folks in the department, show up to the executive team and basically say, let me walk you through the expanded programs we've got. Here's the stuff that we think we need to be doing, that there's an expectation for the community. And so what that may be are adding positions, it may be adding programs, maybe increasing level of service, things like that. So basically after that, we ask a bunch of kind of questions and whatnot, and then frankly, we sort of then try to order and prioritize those across sort of the general fund for the city. And so we then kind of look at, well, what could we fund if, so remember, if we went to our effective rate, which is a drop in the tax rate, actually cutting the tax rate, what could we fund in expanded programs? Well, we've got some things that we think are cost neutral. So for instance, we use contract help to keep up with inspections. And we spend so much on that we think we could hire 2 more inspectors, if we can hire inspectors, and get better level of service. So it's cost neutral for us otherwise. We think we can do kickball league, dodgeball league, daddy-daughter dance. You pay a fee to do that. It pays for itself. Staff time to put it on, but for all the supplies and stuff, that would kind of come through it. And so we've got those. And then when you get further down, you've got the items that have an additional cost to us. So EMS training room projector, school resource officer, there's a cost to us for that, but the school district's paying the bulk of it. And frankly, in light of the shootings that occurred last year, need to do it. We're investing in some stuff to go with the software program we're getting for kind of our inspections development code enforcement software to help use that and get the most out of it going forward. For the library to take payments online. I'll skip the compensation study and come back to that, but driver's license check. So everybody made sure probably you had a driver's license when you started working here, right? Should have. Nods across the board. Some people are going, I don't remember that. But I doubt anyone has had their driver's license checked since then. But we know people lose their driver's license. So now imagine we've got a city employee driving a city vehicle who lost their license in some issue 6 months before. They get in a wreck. That's not a good spot for us to be in. And we don't ever bother to check. And they go, well, I haven't had my license for like 3 years. So again, obvious thing we need to be doing, but I got to find money to do it. $35,000 in additional supplies for parks for maintenance, for building maintenance, and streets. So a bit more money added to what they've had year over year. But is $35,000 going to necessarily fix our basketball problem out at Pickerel? Probably not. You know, how far is that really going to get us? We've got a problem with a lack of a sidewalk on Westchester across from the school where kids are parking, cutting across mid-block. Looked and said, well, why are they doing that? Just being kind of teenagers? Well, no, the answer is, what did we expect them to do? There's not a sidewalk on the side they're parking, so the obvious thing to do is cross over to the sidewalk. But that's probably not quite enough to get that sidewalk in. Maybe is, maybe not, but that's the only one. We wouldn't be able to do the sidewalk by the water tower in Northcliffe that's never been there. Same thing, building maintenance. So it helps, but it's a drop in the bucket. So we're saying going down to the effective is not the idea. So if we kept the current tax rate, we do some cleaning contracts, security cameras, because we lose some things over at the Civic Center, walk off. Everybody seemed to really like the Parks Program Guide that we did this year, but y'all cobbled it together last year. So council, if you want to do it, we need to budget for it. $15,000. Let me back up, though, to the comp study. When we did the budget retreat with council, we said, 4 years ago we did the class and comp study, and what we said is that we're going to redo that after the implementation, see where we are, and then make some decisions. And frankly, my recommendation that you may have heard about was, I don't think it's worth the $42,000 to bother doing it, because there is no money to implement it. Our 5-year projection, with what we've got, with all the stuff to maintain a level of service and that we know we're so far behind on, we frankly cannot afford to give people another round of class and comp raises. There's not another $1.6 million in there at the rate we're going. So my recommendation is, why spend $42,000 to know where you stand if no matter what the answer is, you're not going to do anything about it, right? Why bother? Now, council said, well, if we don't know, then we don't know, and how can we, and I get that, but then frankly still, so we know, and then we go, all right, we're not going to do anything about it. And as frustrating as it may be for some of us last year when the class and comp study that we didn't have enough money to go further with the implementation, our consultant told us stories about some communities they had worked for that had done this. When they presented to their councils, council looked at it and said, yeah, it's just too expensive overall. We can't do anything, and just shelve it. Imagine the feeling of those folks that you go, yeah, this is how much of a problem we have, but we've got no solution. But Counselor Credit said we're going to do it. But what staff recommended is you need to go up to the rollback rate, and I'll kind of get to that. So what the rollback rate does for us is, if we know we have this problem of maintenance, particularly in streets, parks, buildings, we've got in other areas too, now we can really make a dent. So 200 plus the 35, $235,000 additional for those areas. We then can add some things this year that we get some economies of scale with, or we get some efficiency. So now I've got enough maintenance money that let's bring in an HVAC tech, trading off some of that money, and we think we'll save money in the long run. Now, it may take a while, but we think we can do that. Tire balancing machine, quarterly drug screenings, much like the driver's license check. We're not drug screening our police officers, could be issues. You know, if you've gone over to the library, they haven't kept up with the growth, so an additional $20,000 in materials, radar feedback signs, senior center parking lot shelter management software. We are able to do some things this year with that to catch up and gain some efficiencies. But one of the things by going up on the tax rate to the rollback and doing the class and comp study this year is we'll get the results of that in the spring. And so when we talk about the budget, now we're not standing there going, what good does that have because I don't have any money to do anything with. I've got the ability to say, much like some of those items that add efficiencies, how can we reduce turnover? How can we get the most of our people? How can we keep from burning our folks out because we work them so hard? We've got the ability to sort of do that. Now, again, it's probably not going to be a windfall, and we're not going to move up to the 66%. It won't. We'll creep up a few percentage points, but every bit helps, and we'll be able to add staff at the rate higher than we are now. So by going up on that rate, it gets us there. I was asked last night at the community budget meeting, well, how long do you think we're going to need to keep the tax rate there? And my answer was forever, because we have a lot of stuff we need to do that we know about. So for instance, you know, what are we not funding? It's a bunch of stuff that we're not funding. So this is the list of things that people ask for. So real quick pause. You know, we've got departments that don't have admin support staff or don't have enough, and so they're having other people have to do the admin duties instead of their primary duties. Engineering, the library, for example. You know, we've added a number of inspections to building inspections, which is great. We haven't added any engineering inspectors, but we keep adding new streets and new development. So when we go out and do the presentation at council like we did last week to say, hey, council, now we're going to fix Schertz Parkway down here, or the section we just did up here. Well, guess what? It wasn't built like it should have been or like we thought it was. And so now it's going to cost us more. So the problem we had with the curbs on this concrete section of Schertz Parkway cost us another, how much was that, $100,000 or something? Another $100,000 because it wasn't built right. So again, if we're not having enough engineering inspectors like building inspectors, we're not checking the stuff to make sure it's built right, and that's why now we're spending how much on the rec center?
The rec center restroom remodel plus one other fix was about $475,000.
Yeah. And that's misleading to call it a restroom remodel, right? Because that imagines, hey, I don't like the pink tile that was from the 1950s. Let's upgrade to a more modern look, right? But were the problems a little more significant than that, Gil? So, like, what was really had it done, the water leaks? Yeah. Support structures were starting to rot out. So, yeah, it's not a remodel, though we call it that. So it costs us money if we're not able to do that. And we can keep going through the list. You know, and all you're going, yeah, I need these people. I need another park worker. I need some upgrades in positions. Keep going on down, James. With all of that, all of its needed stuff, all of its things we think our citizen wants for us to deliver the level of service, but it's $3.7 million that we don't have, even going up to the rollback rate. So why are we not going to say, just do it for a year and then drop back down? So I got a bunch of stuff I still need to do and stuff that we haven't anticipated. And so that's the recommendation, it lets us try to make a dent in that. And I've been real clear, we're not going to change this thing overnight. It's going to still be a slow, long slog. And to be perfectly blunt, if this goes into effect at the rollback rate or a higher rate, the pressure is going to be on us to deliver. So that additional funding, people are going to want to see results. Hey, we're paying more in taxes. This is what you said you were going to do. You got to deliver, and we need to do a better job communicating out to folks. So while it's good for us, it also puts the pressure, I think, fairly on us. But that's essentially the deal. Now, the way the process works is we go to council on Tuesday for the first reading, not the first reading, the first public hearing, the first public hearing. And then a week later, they do the first reading of the ordinance on the budget and tax rate, and the meeting after that, they do the second reading on the budget and the tax rate. So we'll see what we've got. You know, we've done the 3 community meetings. We never get a real huge turnout at those. But I would say by and large, I think most people get it. Most people can look around and say, yeah, we're not keeping up on this stuff. We're not spending money efficiently. Nobody likes paying taxes. But for the kind of community we want, it's worth it for us. You know, the other thing, and we've talked about this, is our demographic has changed. Schertz, you know, my impression when it started was an affordable, middle-class, blue-collar kind of community tied to the military. And folks came out and had to help with stuff. So our EMS started as a volunteer effort. Fire department, volunteer effort. We built the first playscape, volunteer effort. Library folks, Sandy, volunteer effort initially. And then we slowly started adding to pay for that. But as we could, the new home, so a new home, the median home value, so the average new home value in Schertz that's in SCUC ISD. I'm not knocking the other districts, I just don't know what the number is, but not East Central or Comal ISD, but it's probably, it may be higher. Just in SCUC ISD, median new home value, $285,000. That's nuts. You know, all the stuff that we have down south, Laura Heights, $300, $350 an hour, I don't know where we get enough people coming in with money to buy that expensive. I don't know, where are all the jobs that pay that, right? Now, a lot of them are exempt, veteran exemptions. Ironically, you look at it, because we talked about that before. But, you know, so I think the expectation of our residents moving in now that are paying $285,000 house, if I'm going to pay $285,000 for a house, I expect better service, right? More professionalism from our staff, be it permits, be it firefighters, be it police officers, better response time, more materials at the library, better quality sort of stuff, and again, willing to pay for it. But everybody's not like that. We need to be cognizant of that, because we've got a lot of folks going, hey, I can't afford that. It's a balancing act. But that's where we are, and that's sort of the gist of the budget in a nutshell. So I've talked for over an hour pretty much straight with just a couple of brief interludes from James. What kind of questions or comments do you guys have? Somebody have a question or a comment. Firefighters did. We showed up with you the other night, and it was, 2.5 hours just getting peppered with stuff. All right, go ahead. Is this a trick question? Okay. Yep. Yeah,
the question was, do we look at bringing in people just an expense, or we also consider additional revenue that they may bring in?
We look at primarily as an expense, because there are very few people that we would bring in that the revenue is going to fully offset. That's the reality of it. So we have some positions that we look as cost neutral. Right now we're paying over $400,000 a year, I think, in contract inspection services. So I can hire a couple people, reduce that, think we can get a little more bang for our buck.
280.
What's that?
280.
280, sorry. James, don't correct me. But so even take inspections. Adding additional inspectors probably doesn't bring in really more revenue. It just shortens the response time, shortens the turnaround time, better level of customer service. Though there's some that we feel like, yeah, you get a bit with, but really not. Even EDC, if I added another person in EDC that generates economic development, does it really bring in enough money to kind of do that? So let me say this. We try to understand the link between when we add this person and we take on inherently that cost, what is the actual cost based on change in revenue? So for instance, we added a school resource officer and the cost is $20,000. Well, they get paid a lot more than that, but the district is paying that. So that's an example where we look at kind of the revenue that comes in to balance that out. We also look at what does that get us, and we've had some tough conversations, particularly as of late, with folks to go, if I added a position or changed a position or whatever, what is it we're going to get for that? Is that not true, Jason? Yeah. We had those conversations. So again, we look at that as well. But to be very clear, we focus very clearly on there is a definitive cost for that, and all of what we do doesn't pay for itself in terms of additional revenue coming in. It's not that direct correlation. There could be some of the billing things, we talked about that, would make the case, do a better job of that, get more revenue, pay for itself, but kind of few and far between, and you're not sure the results.
We bring on another city to the EMS service, they would pay, cover that additional crew that would need to go out there.
Other questions? Seriously, there got to be some more questions. Yeah, I don't know that we've looked at every city, but when we did a comparison, and if y'all are interested, go see Tony and Bill in GIS, and they can show you the map of Colleyville versus us. So yeah, what we perceive to be from a little bit of research we've done is that there are some extreme differences. Cities like Dallas and Austin that don't have a high concentration of veteran populations don't have near the cost, but those of us around San Antonio, Killeen, where you've got a lot of military presence, seems to be a much, much higher rate. But go see Tony or Bill, and they'll show you the map, and that'll give you a feel. But we haven't fully looked at every place. And again, to be clear, the state rebate program, you have to be next to a base to be eligible. So if you're technically not touching them, a la Cibolo, nothing for you. So it could always be worse. Yes? Mr. James, come on, seriously, what's that? So they are. What council said is let's do another compensation study. And they also talked, and so this is a little bit where kind of the budget we play with and we move and adjust. Because the other comment we got is, in addition to that study, we probably need to look at kind of a manpower study. How are our staffing levels relative to everybody else? Because one thing that caused a lot of frustration with the last class in comp is we kept saying, we're not looking at workload. Workload is not a factor. The fact that you've got a volume of work, that's not what the study considers. So you had some people going, but we're crazy busy. Got to put in a bunch of extra hours. Don't I get credit for that? Well, with that study, you didn't. The idea that council's talked about, so they may make some adjustments to this, is to actually do a manpower study with the class and comp study. So the idea would be is that this coming, again, first kind of series of paychecks in October, the final phase of the last one will get funded. Okay, and we've probably got some people in this room who are do a raise from that. Then they'll kick off doing the new study, and we'll probably modify the process we did last time, but it's similar with you guys having input on that, redoing that study, and then we'll look at it after the first of the year, in kind of after Christmas and in the winter and early spring, to see what the results are, go to council and go, all right, now that we know, what do y'all want to do? I think the inclination is they're going to want to fund more, and so then that'll be factored into next year's budget. Okay, does that make sense? So yeah. Yeah, so here, and that's a good kind of question. So we used to do a cost of living adjustment, and we moved from that to doing a merit increase system. But they're effectively the same thing. It's annually you have this ability to get a raise, whatever the basis of it is, be it call it a cost of living or call it a merit. We switch to the merit under the concept of hearing people go, look, I work harder than the guy next to me. Why do they get the same cost of living adjustment that I do? So the idea was go to a merit-based system. So the person who, the opinion of their supervisor, and there's always that caveat, is doing more, has the ability to get a higher percentage. So that's it. So let me talk about what we did this year different. Let me kind of take a step back and talk broadly. So this year when we were looking at the merit going into effect, and we looked at what had happened over the past years, we kind of started looking at staff in different groups. So by department, let's look at the percentage of folks in fire versus PD versus EMS versus inspections who got a 4% or 2% or no increase. And by and large, a small percentage don't get, but most people get the 2, then fewer get the 4%. We looked by department, and then we looked kind of by grouping. If you kind of take the department heads, assistant directors, and looked at them, if you took the supervisors sort of as a group, then you took everybody else, what we noticed is there was a big difference then in the percentages. And I think it's for a couple of reasons. So one is, because we do a percentage increase, those folks who are department heads who make more, when they get a 4% increase, it takes a bigger chunk of money than somebody who is a much lower grade, and so it eats up a lot for those people to get it. I also think there was a bit of, we maybe weren't taking as tough a look at our department heads and saying, who's their peer group? They've been doing a good job, but they're department heads, so frankly the expectation ought to be higher. So if we compared them against one another and we go, well, they're doing a good job, but they're not doing as good as most of the department heads, maybe they don't deserve that 4%. So we shifted how we looked at it, and we kind of, the way we used to do it is we sort of rank ordered every employee from the highest eval score to the lowest. And if you were over a 2, then you got at least a 2% increase. So there was a hard, fast line for that. But where the cut between a 4 and a 2 was a function of how much money. So we budget how much a year for merit increases?
At mid-year, it's $360,000, so it's about $320,000 annual increase.
Yeah, about $320,000 to fund that. So based on the amount of money, and so based on how they rank order and how much the people get paid and what that 4% or 2% is, we then get that line. That's where that line gets cut. That's a tough room to be in where you're going, ooh, that's close. This person doesn't, this person does. But what we did instead of doing it that way is we said, look, let's group those together and let's have their cut lines be at a different level to try to equalize the percentage. And so we made a substantial flip. Some department heads probably are aware of this, and you may have heard about it, grumbling. More of those folks got 2% than in past years. And we had more folks in that last group get a 4% instead of a 2%. So now you get kind of enough people, because I think the complaint before was, I got a department of 10 people and one person got a 4%. It's so hard to get that it's not attainable. And that's what that change was in part supposed to bring about. Other things we've talked about, and again, it all comes down to money, is if we could do sort of a bigger kind of swing with it. So what if we could do maybe it's a 5%, a 4%, a 3%, or a 2%, and instead of $320,000, we had $425,000. So now you've really got a chance of getting some differentiation. Now you've got a chance of doing some to getting that dent. That's something we'll look at. The other we've heard people say is, well, what if you did a cost of living? So say everybody gets a 1% cost of living, and then we still do the merit at the rate we're doing it. That's something we've looked at. And I think that all goes to partly the class and comp study of where are we relative to everybody else, and what's the mechanism to move us up. I think some other issues that we're going to have to deal with regard to this class and comp study that other communities have dealt with and other cities have dealt with is, for those folks who are in a lower grade, are we paying them what we feel like is a living wage? Because, the way we do the class and comp is we kind of look, well, what other places pay? And, well, it's consistent with what other places pay. But as a city, if we're saying, hey, look, everybody here contributes to making the community better, No matter what your grade, this is what you're trying to pay your family for. Doesn't matter if the market pays here, we're going to pay that person up to this level because it's the right thing to do. That's our core value, and that's what we're about. Then we bump that. So that's, I think, a policy question we're going to have to look at this year. What do we do with those lowest paid folks? Because frankly, for the lowest paid folks, getting a 2% or a 4% isn't a whole lot of money each year to begin with. And are we going to say, because of the realities of that, we're going to, and that's going to create some compression, but it's worth it to do that, to say everybody's here, if you're working, is going to make kind of a living wage. Though barely, probably still. I mean, so there's some policy questions we're going to have to revisit. And again, how do we move up? Is it continuing to implement the class and comp, or is it more money going at a cost of living and a merit, which effectively drives us the same way? And then we've got the policy question of, you know, if you're single and you've got benefits here, great benefits program. But talk to the folks who have families and kids on the insurance, and it's tough. So we have tried the last few years to help those folks out because, again, if we're trying to retain people and you hire somebody early in their career and they're single, that's great. Hey, insurance is great. But then they get married, have a kid, put the kid on going, I can't afford to work here anymore because that insurance isn't what it used to be. So I think we need to look at the benefits program across the board. We've had issues with cert pay that we need to revisit. Things like that I think we need to take a crack at across the board that kind of all work hand in hand. But I'm going to be blunt. When we identify the problem and where we want to be, it's going to take money, and without doing something different, we're never going to get there. You know, the other thing to keep in mind is we also give sort of the Christmas longevity pay. How much do we pay out in that, James?
$375,000.
Yeah, $375,000 a year. So we pay out more every year in longevity than we give out in merit increases. But when we talk about what we make, nobody tends to think about that longevity check that they get. But it is a big chunk of money. So again, likely this year you will be bombarded with reminders of, hey, here's your longevity check. Here's how much you're getting in your longevity check. Because it's a big chunk of money that we do every single year, and it all rolls into that. But we don't think of it as salary, kind of, but effectively it is. And some people do because of some changes in state law. We've got to slot it so everybody's different now. They don't get it necessarily one time. So there's a long-winded answer. And I will say this is the stuff that we expect to hear from you guys. And I'll say this, some people put a lot of time and a lot of energy and a lot of effort into their JATs and asking questions the last class and comp. Other folks did not. And so can be brutally honest, as many of you know. So if you didn't put the time and energy and effort, or you're not going to put the time and energy and effort to really doing a good job on the stuff they ask you to fill out, don't expect any empathy from me if it doesn't turn out the way you want, because you didn't bother to put in the time to get where you need to be. So, but that is a long-term problem, but that's part of where the tax rate comes in. What are you showing us here, James?
This is a list of communities that actually applied for state relief from disabled veterans. So Killeen was 2.4 million, off by 100,000, but Bell County is actually higher than them at $2.9 million. City of Copperas Cove, they requested 600,000, and Coryell County requested 429.
Yeah, is Killeen in Bell County?
I believe.
I believe it is. So again, imagine you're living in Killeen. Not only is your city taking a hit, your county's taking a hit.
So they requested in this last year $6.3 million in aid from the state. That's after the 1% that they can't request, and they only got paid $3.2 million.
Yeah. So you can't request how much you lose. You got to cut it down, and even then they only funded half. And now we're going to be added to this list, so they're not going to be pleased to see us show up on there.
And to your question or your comment, this only includes the communities that are actually eligible and received assistance.
Yeah.
So there's a community right outside Killeen.
What community is that, James? Parker Heights?
Right. Yeah. That they're getting hit just as hard as Killeen is, but they're not adjacent to the base, so they don't get anything. Like Cibolo, they're getting hit with this too. Maybe not as bad as us, but they're seeing those exemptions, but they don't touch Randolph, so they don't get to apply.
Yeah. You're preaching to the choir. Yeah, you're preaching to the choir. And I'm sure these hard numbers will have a significant impact on the state legislatures who'll say, well, we didn't realize that. Now we've seen the light. We got to make a change. We'll see. But yeah, so, but it's incumbent on us. If we got a problem, then we need to speak up on it. If we're not speaking up on it, then again, we shouldn't be complaining about it. So yeah, that's a push that, again, I will make going forward.
During this, so how we would rank in here. So I'm not sure how, of course, their numbers are going up as well. But for this next 2019 request, the city will put in for about 300,000. So less than any of these. And unless they change the allocation number of 3.2, I wouldn't be surprised if we got $100,000 less back. So maybe a third.
Every bit helps. Other questions? Somebody? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so we do a couple of things. So one is we've got the folks in the Economic Development Corporation. So while they're a corporation, they're effectively city employees. And so they're down in our building, across from kind of finance. So Kyle Kennetetter, Patty Horan, Drew, Jennifer Colby. Their whole purpose in being is to bring in new businesses. And then Jennifer's job really is to help grow existing businesses or retain businesses. So, we also have some things that aren't pleasant that hit us. So, for instance, the GE facility out by Cisco is closing. So they had a job fair this week for all the employees there that are getting laid off, which is, I think, more than half of their folks that they're not moving to other facilities. And so what will happen is, over time, if we don't see a new business move in there, because keep in mind with our property tax, you get off the building, but for businesses, you get business personal property. All the stuff that's in the building, all the equipment and machinery, they pay tax on that. Well, when the business closes, they move all that stuff out and sell it. Building sits empty, our revenue drops. So yeah, we've got folks that do that. And then also, we don't necessarily do a whole lot with tourism. We do some things that draw it a bit or that we partner with. So we help fund when BBYA has their baseball tournament that brings in from a larger area. We give them some of that hotel occupancy tax funding. Those teams come in, hopefully stay in the hotels in the area, eat at the restaurants in the area, do stuff like that. We also put on, the festivals, but most of those are kind of day stuff. We don't get a lot of overnight guests that you do like in San Antonio. But, part of where we try to drive new businesses and new development and folks coming here is through the economic development effort, through high-quality services, but then, frankly, it's the quality of life stuff. It's the parks, movies in the park, concerts in the park. It's the library. It's the stuff like that. So it's that quality of life stuff that drives. We, frankly, don't do a lot with tourism, but we do bring in a substantial amount of money every year in hotel occupancy tax. About how much, James?
Yeah, 500,000.
About $500,000. But that's got a very limited range of what it can be spent on from that. But obviously, if those folks come and they shop, buy things, there's sales tax. Yeah. Evo coming in, stuff like that. They'll pay taxes. Yeah, so what economic development does is they do a couple things. They'll do tax abatements, where they kind of rebate a portion of their property taxes or sales taxes. But then we also do incentives, grants for infrastructure. So they'll build something. We'll give them money to build it, like a water line or a sewer line. But then we often pay them back once they've demonstrated they've brought in revenue. So we still make money off the deal. So typically the way it's structured is, so Kellum Medical over off 3009 is going to do an expansion. They're going to get a grant for helping put in some infrastructure, water line, sewer line, drive, whatever. But to hit that, the new value of the building and the new payroll has to hit a certain level. So we kind of make money off it at the city. But yeah, that's an incentive to do that. So that's us paying to subsidize them coming in to try to bring them in. So those are kind of the two things we do with economic development primarily. We do. But typically the warranty you get, some of the equipment like HVAC systems is a bit of a longer warranty. The buildings typically have a year or something like that. But some of the buildings that we built, Fire Station 2, the rec center, we built them. We served as our own general contractor, the city did, which means if there's a problem with it, we turn and look at ourselves and go, hey, we created this. So we don't do that anymore. So now what we do is we've changed the way we do it. So we contract out and we have a general contractor. So Thomas S. Byrne is building the fire station. If there is a problem there, we're going to go after them. So as you guys probably know, we're having problems with the air conditioning system at the Animal Adoption Center still. So you sometimes get that. But because of the way we did it by hiring a general contractor to build it, we are now able to go after the people responsible. So there's a cost, there's a litigation potentially if you can't work it out, but we're able to go, y'all were supposed to build this thing right, it's not working the way it should. We may have to demonstrate, and this is sometimes the challenge, whose fault is it? Is it the guy, the engineer that designed the HVAC system? Is it the equipment manufacturer? Is it the general contractor? So, for instance, we have a company that we brought in, an HVAC, to look at the system and try to determine where that is so that we can point it out to them and go, you need to pony up for it, otherwise we're not going to take it sitting down. So yeah, we're trying to do that differently. Part of it is changing the way we're doing business so that we can go after people when they don't deliver. Anybody else? Okay. If you think of a question, I mean this sincerely, feel free to come by my office, go by James's office, ask, shoot an email if you want. If something pops up, happy to answer it. Again, if you're interested in seeing some of those maps, just to get a feel for what Colleyville looks like, let's go by Tony and Bill's area, and Tony can show you those maps. Maybe I'll print them and stick them up on the wall somewhere over there, and y'all can take a look at it. You can even laminate them. They got the laminator a few years ago. So we're at about 40,000 people right now. We'll probably double, I would bet. Depends on kind of what we do with land use and stuff like that, but 70, 80,000. So we're about halfway there in terms of population, but we've still got a lot of industrial area left. We got a lot of land up along 35. None really of I-10 is developed yet, so we've got a lot of growth. But I think that's part of the reason we need to make this change now is because, you know, at some point, as we said, we drive a lot of revenue from growth and development. When you build out, that's gone. You better have been where you need to be. And if we're still that far behind the curve, we're going to be in bad shape then. Because it will. And you have communities that do. They build out. And so you see their various departments shrink in size because there's just not the same. You still pull permits for stuff, but you don't have all the new stuff coming in. Hey, that's it. I thought people would ask another half hour's worth of questions to get out, but who knows? We may have Cade calling up going, what time did y'all wrap up? We haven't seen the fire, folks. I don't know. All right, thank you guys very much. Appreciate it. That's it. You're welcome, Ms. Krause. Killing me.